Hello and happy day to all of you out there. It's going to be a fantastic video today. We're going to be talking about the upcoming changes for Star Wars that seem to be happening. And it turns out that a little rumor, a little leak, a little early scoop that yours truly may have had actually seems to have percolated in some way all the way up to Jon Favreau himself. So let's dive in, because helping us today is an all-star panel of some of the greatest minds in the Star Wars fandom. Let's go ahead and go around. We'll just go clockwise. Everybody introduce yourself real fast, and then we'll dive into this topic.
I'm
Coach,
Coach.
take it away.
Yeah, Coach from Echo Base Network. Very pleased, happy, ecstatic to be here.
I'm Lauren from That Park Place, writer of Star Wars content.
And I am Michelle of Force of Light Entertainment.
All right. Well, happy to have all of you. And of course, I am Pro, and I hope that all of you out there are clicking that like button, hitting subscribe, sharing this, and please click it and stick it to the algorithms. We're talking about that notification bell. Our goal on this channel is to always be uplifting. Yes, we're talking about Star Wars, and yes, there will be times when we're being critical, as we are with all the material we have to cover. But ultimately, what we're trying to do here, as opposed to some other channels, is we're trying to aim higher, and we're trying to help entertainment aim higher as well. And so by putting this information out early, a couple weeks ago, we did this thing where we talked about Daisy Ridley potentially coming back to play Rey, and also having Grogu, that is Baby Yoda, right, the other little green Muppet, join her in a theatrical release. And so by getting that information out early, what has happened now is that the access media, well, they got a hold of that, and they couldn't just let that sit. So now they're actually asking some of the movers and shakers within Star Wars, within Lucasfilm, about the veracity of those claims, and we're getting some answers. So, pats on the back to all. I think we've done a good job in doing this. This is the coolest thing we've done since getting Pablo Hidalgo to sit down with us on a weekend. But Coach, tell us about your analysis of the Favreau interview, in which he discussed some of these rumors that we first relayed, with you right there going through that experience with us together.
Sure. So after his latest interview, it makes absolute total sense. And it's almost like he's telling the fandom, this is our plan. Because here's essentially what he said when he's talking about how he could not separate Din Djarin, the character, from Baby Yoda, Grogu. He went at length to explain he knows that a lot of Star Wars fans are being critical of that decision. It seems like the majority of Star Wars fans wanted to see Grogu with Luke at least longer than what we got. So that is fair criticism. So Favreau was going at lengths here to explain and justify why he brought Grogu back into Chapter 17, The Mandalorian. It's almost as if no time has passed. Star Wars comes out with the Mandalorian recap video that was literally a 2.5-minute infomercial about Grogu. You take both of those things together, guys, they're basically telling us, and I don't know how I feel about this, guys. I'm trying to look at this logically and not bring my emotions in, but it's basically Favreau saying, I'm not sure we can go forward at all without the character of Grogu. Without Grogu, there is no Mandalorian. Without Grogu, there's not going to be a next movie. And I think that since they're not going to retcon or redo or alternate timeline or alternate reality or whatever you want to call it, we've already discussed those things. Since they're not going to do that, they think that this is their best chance to appease fans and bring new fans in. Certainly with Grogu, I understand that. I don't like it. I don't have to like it, but I get it. And that's kind of my take there.
All right, Lauren, let's dive into that a little bit deeper. So I was on with Bounding Into Comics the other day with John Trent, and one of the things we discussed was that the positioning of Grogu in that story inside of the series Boba Fett, it made no sense. The Book of Boba Fett with those 2 episodes made no sense. In fact, Boba Fett was essentially sidelined. I mean, he didn't appear except for a few seconds in those episodes. One episode, he didn't appear at all. And so the theory that I have on this, and, take it for what you will, but I think that when they did the deal with Gina Carano, when she was exited from what she was doing, and that sort of terminated much of the roadmap that they had set forth by Favreau and Filoni in what I call the Favloni universe. When they had to dismiss that roadmap, I think then they were stuck because they didn't have a series that was already designated to deal with Luke Skywalker and Grogu. And so therefore they had to pigeonhole this thing into a series that it made no sense. Lauren, what do you think about that?
Well, I don't know that I saw Rangers of the New Republic as a vehicle to explore something with Luke and Grogu. I figure that that's kind of what the spot for the Skeleton Crew show is probably going to take. And my feeling on that was always that they needed to have a vehicle to explore another area of the Star Wars universe where they can introduce new characters, new factions, kind of prepare you for whatever comes after the Empire. They need something to fill that kind of a narrative space. I think what the fans wanted was for the impact of Luke at the end of season 2 to really have an ongoing impact. You got to see in those episodes of the Book of Boba Fett how the Mandalorian was dealing with not having his surrogate son there. He wasn't in a good place. And I think that the use of Grogu in the story this way is to explore the idea of balance. I think where the Jedi went wrong in the prequel era was that they had become so dogmatic to the idea that attachments would ultimately lead to bad things that they became detached from the people. They put themselves in an ivory tower. They became enforcers of the Senate's will. They lost empathy. And that was something that ultimately doomed the order. So one of the things that Grogu can learn from being with Luke is that you do have a sense of detachment and that you don't allow your emotions to rule you.
Except how long was he with Luke?
Well, hold on. I'm getting to a point here with this, which is that because Grogu has gone back now to the Mandalorian, one of the things that you see in that season 3 trailer is Grogu in his pram throwing what looks like a feral towels with a pretty large amount of force energy there. That looks to me like he's not behaving in a balanced fashion. He's using his force abilities in an emotional way. It may be in self-defense. It may not be. What Grogu can bring to Luke is the idea that maybe attachment isn't a bad thing. Maybe this new Jedi Order needs to have some type of empathy that the old Jedi Order didn't have. What Luke can give Grogu is the sense that, yes, that's fine, but your emotions have to be ruled by reason, and you can't give in to them, or you will go down a dark path. So the logical thing to do with Grogu being back with Mando now is show that maybe you should have spent more time with Luke. Maybe learning to be less reliant on him and ruling your own emotions is going to be better for you. You have to remember as well, Grogu survived Order 66. He saw the Jedi Order slaughtered. He's been afraid to be in touch with the Force. That's what Ahsoka said. He's got some latent things that he needs to deal with that really haven't been brought up in the show yet, and I suspect that's going to come out in season 3.
Now, Michelle, the thing that I'm hearing from a number of people around the industry is that when it comes to Grogu, already we're beginning to see the merchandising, the sales for products related to Grogu, related to Baby Yoda, dropping a bit, and that they are oversupplied at the moment. Now, the solution to that, according to people that I've spoken with, is that in any toy line and in any franchise, what people want in terms of continuing to generate revenue is they want to refresh a character through a story arc. And so it seems to me that it's much more difficult to sell 3 years straight of the same looking Baby Yoda, but it's very easy to sell Padawan Baby Yoda at some point. So if we get to the point where Grogu is trained by Rey and she takes the place of Luke Skywalker, do you think that type of merchandise, that sort of toy line of Rey becoming the mentor to Grogu, would that sell? Would families be open to it? Are we jaded against that because we know Star Wars so well, and would normies just jump onto that like crazy and be like, "Oh, cool, Rey's with Grogu. This is awesome."
Yes, I really do think normies would jump onto that. And I will say this, going back to what you were just saying. I actually believe in the episode in the Book of Boba Fett, and those really, I know they were in the finale, but there were 2 episodes specifically that were really just their story, Mando and Grogu. And in the episode with Grogu, I believe there's a conversation between Luke and Ahsoka, and they set up in that conversation. I don't believe Grogu is totally finished with Luke. I think Jon Favreau knows he needs Grogu and the Mandalorian. To me, I know people some of the men get tired of Grogu, but the heartbeat of that show is their relationship. You can't separate it too long. Like it rips out the heart of the show. So I think Jon Favreau wants them together. But if you go back and watch that episode I'm referring to where Grogu is training with Luke, there are definitely seeds planted of, like you were saying, of Luke and Ahsoka, and we now know it's confirmed that Anakin or Hayden Christensen's going to be appearing in the Ahsoka show that's supposed to come this year. I believe Ahsoka and Luke together. I mean, look at Luke. Like, it is his attachment to his father, and it's Darth Vader's attachment to his son that saves the galaxy ultimately. But it was Luke's love for his father that changes that. And I think they set up in that conversation, Luke's going to come, he's going to quickly realize, no, it doesn't have to be this dogmatic way. And Ahsoka can even fill in how some of that dogmaticness led Anakin to where he went. And I think you're definitely going to see a Grogu with a lightsaber at some point, and I think it could still even be with Luke, actually.
And don't forget, he's still got that chain shirt too. So
Yes.
there's an accessory there as well. I wouldn't be the
Sure.
least bit surprised if you start seeing him pick up a little bit more in the way of Mandalorian doodads.
Because look at what was presented. The moment I saw the dark saber at the end of season 1, to me it was like, okay, Grogu's going to be both. He's going to be a Mandalorian in one sense, and he's going to be a Jedi in the other sense, just as the person who had the dark saber was.
And that's the unique tie that exists there, because they have not explored that in this new canon. They've said that this was a very unique thing. They haven't really explained how that Mandalorian Jedi who created that darksaber ended up in the Jedi ranks. There's always been this dissension between the Jedi and the Mandalorians that hasn't really been explored in the new canon, and it kind of needs to be, because it feels like there is some synchronicity between these two cultures. Kanan Jarrus said as much, that the Mandalorians developed their technology and weapons to counter the advantages that the Jedi had. So maybe this leads into more history of the Mandalorian Wars.
And
Now, all of this excites me, and Coach, I'm going to toss it to you.
Sure.
But all of this excites me. This exploring of what could happen with Grogu and with Luke. It kind of takes me back to where we were a year ago, 2 years ago, when people were saying, okay, I didn't like the sequel trilogy at all, but maybe they can start to repair some of that.
Mhm.
The hard problem that I see is that they're putting Grogu, every time he goes to Luke, unless we can fix the what we found out about Luke in the sequel trilogy, they're putting Grogu with a guy who will kill his own nephew, or think about it, to the point that he'll pull out a weapon to kill his nephew. That's not normal. That's not heroic. It's not befitting of a hero. I mean, talk about maligning a hero's character, but they really did that. Coach, I can see the massive potential that would exist with Grogu and Luke, and with them trying to get away with what was done via The Last Jedi. But I can't see that you can resolve much of that if you go straight to Grogu with Rey. Can you walk us through what Jon Favreau said in the interview, and where he was careful in order to not dismiss what we've discussed, and at the same time not confirm it?
So without pulling it up, he spoke both ways. He talked to both sides of the fandom in that interview when he said that he could see the appeal either way. He basically said what Michelle said just a moment ago, that he literally said that the relationship between Din Djarin and Grogu is the heartbeat of the show, of the New Republic era. That is nearly a word for word quote there, and he's right. It is. I think a lot of fans are still coming to grips with that, but that is the relationship. Yet he talks about the separation of Luke and Grogu, and he says that he can understand the appeal for both ways. He understands the appeal for the fandom with Grogu and Din Djarin, yet he understands the appeal with Luke and Grogu together, and he says that is why they made the decisions to make it all happen the way that they did. Uh, the thing about it is, I don't feel like we got enough Grogu and Luke, but I guess what he's saying is they did as much as they could do. And back to what we were just saying, it's my speculation that, as crazy as it sounds, they're trying to increase the likability. That's the wrong word. They're trying to increase the appeal of Grogu even more than it already is.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's already extremely high. There's no doubt about that. But they got to have it even higher because they're banking on him in the future. And you're
Coach,
absolutely right.
what did they say about Baby Yoda on the big screen? What did he say about that?
So Favreau said that that no Mandalorian characters would be on the big screen anytime soon. Interesting thing about that is that a lot of the media outlets that reported on that quote, they altered the quote and they said, Favreau says no Mandalorian characters will be on the big screen.
It's always, and by the way, that's always an indicator when the media twists something like that. That's always an indicator of intent. And I don't know if Disney said, hey, we need to shift this a little bit, or what happened, because it does Disney no good if we're out here relaying what their industry partners are saying about where this thing's going. That doesn't help Disney at all, because they need the sense of excitement and surprise and shock. They need this to be a big reveal when they eventually come out with this.
Well, I think they're also still in a period where they probably don't know themselves. They're discussing all of these things internally, trying to figure out, what do we do to fix this? And they're getting indicators that are pointing in all these different directions. They probably haven't made a firm decision.
Well, Michelle, we've seen in the last 48 hours, let's say, that Disney really is in quite a bit of trouble. They are cutting content. Marvel is not in a good space. We're going to be finding out in the next couple of days how badly Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is going to do at the box office. You've got a lot of these trade organizations out there sort of building up that it's going to have a good 4-day. And I mean, I'm looking at the results from all the metrics in terms of audience response, and it's not good. You've got Star Wars cannot get a theatrical release out there. So what do you think in terms of Disney kind of scrambling at this point? They've just changed CEOs. They've just changed the chair of the board. What do you think? What should be the way that Disney begins to look at moving Star Wars in order to excite the most fans possible?
Well, I mean, I think we all would agree that Star Wars has been horribly mismanaged. So, I mean, I would start by getting someone to lead with vision, or to lead Lucasfilm, because let's just face it, Kathleen Kennedy has not done a very good job. That's just that is a fact. Like, that isn't really an opinion; it's a fact at this point. So I would start there. But I think you have had major success. I mean, I think The Mandalorian's been more successful than the Marvel stuff, and definitely in sales. So I think that is, yeah. So, I mean, I would definitely keep empowering Jon Favreau with Mando and the Book of Boba Fett. They just have a story there. That's the bottom line. There wasn't enough to go with that. And I've heard things as to why that is, but
Michelle, think about this though. Here's the quandary they find themselves in. Yes, The Mandalorian has been successful for the first 2 seasons, which all predate sort of the conflict that re-arose, the cultural issues at Lucasfilm. Nothing else has been successful out of them in terms of Disney Plus content. So how do you bottle up whatever it is that's making The Mandalorian succeed without going into this other stuff, which clearly isn't?
Ask that again exactly, so I know exactly.
Mandalorian, highly successful. All the other stuff, not. How do they, what is it about The Mandalorian that people love?
To me, it had the heartbeat of the original trilogy. Like it felt like Star Wars for the first time in a long time. It had the heart, it had the humor of Star Wars. Like Jon Favreau just clearly has a better grasp of what Star Wars is and isn't, in my personal opinion, at least, and clearly to a lot of people. And then, I mean, let's just be real. I know I'm a huge Grogu fan. I know some people get annoyed with it, but it was a stroke of genius. I mean, that finale with Grogu was genius. And guess what? Was it to sell stuff? Sure, it was. But Star Wars needs that. They can't advertise Coca-Cola in their TV show. They need toys to sell and things like that. And Grogu was just a stroke of genius, and it went back to those relationships. That's what makes the first three so special, are the bonds, the friendships, the love that is there between the cast. And it's like you get that with Grogu and Mando again. There's that heartbeat, like I said. Some of the new stuff has just felt like a shell. There's no heart. It may look good, some of it may be entertaining, but there's not like a pulse behind it.
Right. Excellent points, all. I totally agree with what you're saying. Coach, to circle back to that statement that Favreau made about Mandalorian characters not appearing on the big screen anytime soon, what do you think in terms of wiggle room and in terms of, does that dismiss the scoop that we had earlier? Does that dismiss the rumor? Does it make it less or more likely? And can we parse anything out of that statement?
I think it makes it more likely. As we all know, time is relative. When he says no Mandalorian character is going to be on the screen anytime soon, that could mean whatever he wants it to mean. You know,
right.
that could
we
be,
don't know if that means 2 to 3 years it's going to happen.
Exactly.
Did he give any sort of affirming statement that indicated that we're likely to see them on the big screen?
Not that I recall right offhand.
Okay. And let's go around and do final thoughts on this topic. I want to thank everybody for being here. This has been fantastic. We're going to continue to follow all this, but we'll start with Lauren. Lauren, what do you think about where Star Wars is going?
I think it's all in flux right now. I don't think they really have any firm plans. I think they do understand it's broken. Something is fundamentally wrong with what we're doing, but they're flailing because they don't understand what made the originals work in the first place. They do know The Mandalorian works. They know that they've got something special there. My fear is that if they continue to try and cram in ties to the sequel trilogy, they will kill that too. So I think season 3 is going to be absolutely critical for them. If they screw up in any way there, they're going to lose their audience. They have to tread very carefully.
Michelle, is Rey coming back? What do you think?
I think she could come back in like the next 5, 6, 7 years. And if you are going to bring her back, I would probably put her with Grogu. But back to what I said, you can have your cake and eat it too in this situation. You can still, in the next couple years, let Luke and Grogu train together more and give the audience that on the small screen. Because to me, if you bring Rey back, you almost are going to need a new puppet at that point for Grogu. Like you're going to have to make him a little bit bigger, a little bit older. I mean, at what point does the kid speak?
Would it help?
I think we're heading in that direction. I think
Yeah.
we're heading into hearing from, in fact, I would not be shocked at all if in the 3rd season, Grogu finally speaks.
Would it work better if instead of having Grogu train under Rey, Rey has to seek out Grogu to learn something?
Yes, that would be good. That would be excellent.
That would be, but I don't know that they would ever allow that.
I just wonder if it would make it more palatable.
Michelle, what was your thought?
Yes, because it would also make him more of a true little Yoda. Like, which I mean, obviously, I know we all call him Baby Yoda, but because I mean, Yoda was so wise. So, I mean, is it believable that little Grogu over the next many years, I mean, that would be many years to meet up with Rey, is like much wiser than she is? Absolutely. He's lived much longer. So,
Coach,
I
any
think
final-
that would be great.
Just because
Coach-
he's in a baby's body doesn't mean he doesn't have the wisdom.
Yes.
True that. Coach, any final thoughts? It seems to me that there are 2 branches within Lucasfilm. You've got Favreau doing his stuff. You've got the New Republic stuff. But then also, it seems to me that there's a push inside that studio in directions that aren't aligned with what he's wanting. Any chance that The stuff that might happen with Rey is completely disconnected from the stuff that's going on inside the Disney Plus shows.
Sure, I think there's a chance that it's disconnected. And like Lauren just said, Star Wars needs a win. In The Mandalorian season 3, we're about to find out. The moment that unfortunately, so many fans are like in fear of the moment that the New Republic era, Mando, the Rangers of the New Republic that didn't happen, the Book of Boba Fett, every Skeleton Crew, everything. They're fearful of the moment that it directly ties into the sequels. And when that
Yeah.
happens, you are going to see more older generation fans of
Mass
Star Wars
exodus.
leave. They're leaving. So so if that in fact is the plan, then they have to appeal to newer people. They have to keep the people that they've picked up in the last few years with Grogu and the Mandalorian and all that. The thing is, Pro, that I think is really interesting. I with all that said, I trust in Favreau. Favreau knows the secret sauce. He basically his entire interview, he basically gave us a summation of The Mandalorian chapter 16. It's the relationship between Din Djarin and Grogu, but it's also Grogu and Luke Skywalker. And in that one episode, we got both, and it was the perfect mixture. Look at Mandalorian chapters 12 through 16. You got Ahsoka, you got Boba Fett, you got Bo-Katan. So many good things are going. So let's see what happens in season 3. Favreau knows what the fans would go absolutely crazy for, and people like me will be crying on camera again if they pull off the magic. And I hope that he is able to give us the things that we all love.
Well, thank you to everybody for being here. I agree on all points. Once again, these are 3 of the greatest minds, the best articulators of the Star Wars community and fan base. And it's an honor each and every time that we get to come together and talk with this audience. By the way, it's an honor every time I get to do this with an audience. I'm so fantastically pleased with how many people are tuning in. The subscriber numbers are going up, and I hope that's happening for all of my guests today. We'll have links to their stuff in the description. Make sure that you're clicking on that. One final thing for those of you who have stuck in here all the way to the end of the video, you are going to be rewarded, because I want to let you know that I think over the next, I would think 2 weeks, there's going to be some stuff coming out of Lucasfilm. And I think it's going to be rather significant. I don't know who's going to get the first scoop on it. I don't know who's going to be able to report on it. But I think that there are things in motion that are going to lead to some big rumors coming out of Lucasfilm in the next 14 days. So be in tune for those. If I get them, great. If somebody else gets them, fine. And I'm sure all of us will be covering those once they hit. So for everybody out there, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep growing, keep learning, and of course, keep having fun.